Welcome back to the video series Critical Thinking Skills in Science. This is Chapter 4, Building Our Own or My Own Philosophy, Worldview Philosophy, and this is session number 4. Again, we're looking at the house, and the progress that we're doing in building the house is that we started with zero culture, point zero, the culture, and which then that corresponds to Stephen Jay Gould's culture and to Weltbild of the Welt system. We've gone up to epistemology, which is our source of reliable knowledge. And now we're moving up into metaphysics, and we're answering questions about metaphysics. Metaphysics has 3 branches to it. The first branch is theology. What do we do with God? What's your concept of God? What kind of God do you have? And so you define him. In mine, theology, does God exist? Yes, I do believe that God exists, and that he is the Hebrew God. Number 2, ontology. What is real? And that is the next phase that we're going into, is that reality. Where does reality reside? Is it something mental, or is it a physical reality? Number 3 is a universal science, the search for first causes. We're going to continue on. We've answered number 1, which was our theology, and number 2 is ontology. What is real? And philosophers can be divided up into 2 basic groups to start with. And that is they're idealists or realists. And that means, okay, where is reality? What is the base of reality? For an idealist, reality is based as an ideal in the mind. And so there may not exist a real external reality. The reality is like something played on in the mind. The realist is somebody that believes that there is a reality, a physical reality that exists outside the mind, and that the mind is trying to grapple with and understand that external reality. And there's different views on how that's done in both camps of being a realist and an idealist. Again, my metaphysics, my ontology, what am I? I am a realist, but not in the same vein as what they would call a naive realist. A naive realist is somebody that believes that there exists an object external to the thinking, and I can know that object one-to-one. So in other words, it's not without the wiggly lines. It's not without the influence of a theory, habit, prejudice, or culture. It is just a direct correspondence. I know that this exists. I have touched it, felt it, observed it, and that my observation and there is no interpretation of it. It's just a direct connection, a direct one-to-one correspondence. That is naive realism. I do not believe in that direct correspondence. I am what's called a critical realist, whereas I do believe there is a real world, and I do believe we have access to it. But I cannot know it as it is. I only know it through my perceptions of it. And those perceptions are influenced by my theories and habits, prejudice, and cultures. So I am a critical realist. What are you? What would you feel like your position is philosophically? And this is something that it's hard to do right off, or just say, well, pick one. And it's just kind of like, no, there's a lot of flavors out there between realism and idealism, and you just have to understand that when somebody has a worldview or a philosophy, they have picked one, and they are giving you their interpretation based on what they have chosen to believe about reality. And their reality may be like many. There's a popular movement even among the church today that hell is not a real place, and heaven is not a real place, and etc. And it's kind of like, okay, where's that coming from? Well, you can identify it. It's generally has to do with idealism, and it has to do with that God would not do that, or there aren't places like that, or that is influenced. That theology is influenced by one's choice of realism or idealism. And so that's where we have to choose. And like I said, I had to do a lot of research. I had to figure out what I was, because in my program I had to defend, and they knew who I was, or who I said I was, that I was a Christian and that I believed as a creation that God had created. Therefore, I had to defend it philosophically. And so that's where I came from, is I settled on, okay, I believe to be a critical realism reflects my personal position. What is your position? And this class is not graded on if your position I believe to be wrong. It's I don't believe that each one of us has the right to choose our positions, but we do have to choose. So what is your position? I go back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and they exist. God created something that communicated to a culture that was very concrete in their thinking, and that believed that yes, heaven and earth do exist. They are real things that were created. Now this figure of the world and the glasses and the squiggly lines, those squiggly lines represent my critical realism. In other words, that yes, I do believe there is a real world, but my access to it is tainted or is influenced by my theory, habit, prejudice, and culture, which then I come to a personal interpretation of what does that real world look like, and why are there differences? The Hebrews also were realists. They believed in a literal heaven, earth, and in the God that created them, though he is the only deity that cannot be worshipped as an image. And that was prohibited, to even try to make any images of God, of what they thought. And so that's kind of fascinating. They were realists, but at the same time, they worshiped a God that they could not picture, that they could not see. And so that was kind of a tension within their culture that might have created problems. And that is why maybe the culture was always enticed by other religions that had an image to worship. They worshipped something physical that was there with them, and they would take this image and worship that image. And the Hebrews kind of did that. And when they would go out to wars, at times they took with them the Ark of the Covenant, believing that, well, this Ark will give us victory because it is the presence of God. Even though we can't see God, He's in there, and He will give us the victory. The Hebrews were a non-Western cultural tendency. They believed in the God they experienced, though they could not observe Him directly. That's ontology. So what is your ontology? What is real? How would you define reality? Where does it, is it a thought process? Is it rational? Or is your reality based on a real physical existence of an object? Is your reality or your realism a direct realism that corresponds directly to what reality is there? Or is your realism a critical realism? Or do you lean more towards idealism and there is a critical idealism? And so there's a lot of shades out there. And the thing is that we do have to understand that the shade that we choose will influence our model when we get to the top. So this is chapter 4, building our own or my own philosophy. And this is session number 4. Thank you again for accompanying me. And we're going to continue on all the way to session number 10 to finish out the concept of the house. Thank you again.